welcome you all to this next webinar we're doing. My name is Arnon Mello. I'm the president for MELLOHAWK Logistics. And with me today is Alex Krell from the Trade Commissioner Office in Brazil, together with the opening remarks from Dr. Heather Cameron, the Consul General of the Canadian Consulate in São Paulo. So today we're going to talk about aerospace industry, and we're very excited. There's so much material that Alex brought to us. So I want to welcome you both to this webinar today. And I would like to ask Dr. Heather Cameron, the Consul General at the Canadian Consulate in São Paulo, to give some opening remarks and welcome us to this webinar. So thank you so much for being here again.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. It's a little cold and gray here in São Paulo, but I'm sure the weather is better right across Canada. Et merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. The relationship between Canada and Brazil is obviously one that's extremely significant from a trade and investment perspective. And in fact, Brazil is one of Canada's top 15 markets globally. And within that, the aerospace sector is one area of both Canadian success and of significant importance. And so I'm very pleased that our Trade Commissioner responsible for this sector, Alex Krell, is able to present to you today some of the opportunities and obstacles within the sector. I would note that in this multi-billion-dollar relationship of trade and goods and services between Canada and Brazil, that each country is very important to each other. Brazil is an important source of foreign direct investment in Canada, and we have an FDI team within the consulate here in São Paulo that helps to make that happen. And of course, we have many Canadian companies, including in this sector, that are extremely active in Brazil, and many others that are also with significant investments. So it is a large and complex market, but it is one where in the area of both goods, services, and investment, Canadian firms are finding success. As you'll see from Alex's presentation, and you know yourselves, Brazil is a huge country. And so many of the shared challenges that we have in Canada in terms of remote sensing, of managing geography, of finding ways to use satellite, space, aerospace technologies to help monitor and develop areas in Canada, I think are very pertinent in Brazil, and there's much that we can learn from each other. In my first few months here in São Paulo, I've been struck by the openness to innovate here in Brazil, and of course by the size and complexity of the market. So my thanks to MELLOHAWK for this series of webinars that continue to raise the profile of Brazil to Canadian companies. Our Trade Commissioner service is available to all of you to help you grow your business through the Brazil market. And our regional offices across Canada can also provide you with some information. Alex will speak to some of the work and services that the Trade Commissioner Service offices directly. So without further ado, I will hand it back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cameron, so much for those remarks. And yes, I forgot to mention that the reason we're doing this webinar is to showcase the importance of the Trade Commissioner Office in Brazil and all over the world, because it's a service provided by the Government of Canada with great support and intelligence behind the officers all over Brazil. Of course, Brazil has 6 offices of the Trade Commissioner, and of course the Consul General in São Paulo and in Rio as well. So it is amazing that Canadian companies can take advantage of communicating with these offices in specific areas to find potential new clients and potential new contracts. So thank you so much for your remarks. I will, as I always do, I'll talk a little bit about MELLOHAWK Logistics for those who don't know who we are. We are a freight forwarding company based here in Canada, with the head office in Toronto, with warehouses across Canada. And we belong to a network of agents that help us in our interests and needs all over the world. And we have been in business for 17 years, going to 18 very soon. And of course, I am Brazilian, and Brazil is a niche market for us, South America as well. We are one of the approved suppliers for the Canadian government in Brazil, and we have collaborated in many shipments with the Canadian government and Brazilian companies to get safely Canadian product into Brazil. As you know, Brazil has a very complex customs system, and we know very well how that works, and together with our offices in Brazil, we can offer door-to-door service in many areas of products. Some of our services, as I said, ocean, trucking, customs clearance, trade show and exhibitions, and something that is new in Brazil, not quite new, but most people don't know how to maneuver yet, is carnet, the ATA carnet, which is a passport of goods, meaning Brazil is now joining the International Chamber of Commerce, which facilitated now the, if a product has to go for repair or go to Brazil or leave Brazil, it can leave through a carnet, making a customs clearance process much faster. Not every freight forwarder or customs broker in Brazil knows how to execute this new system, even though it's within the regulation of customs in Brazil, but we have been very successful in doing this. So if you ever need help, please get a hold of us and we will walk you through this, this process. And one thing that MELLOHAWK has been doing for years is planning and consulting with Canadian companies in how to get their products safely into the Brazilian market, working with the Trade Commissioner Office to find out duties and taxes and really how to get the product to final destination safely and cost efficiently as well. As I always do, a little update on, let me just shrink this screen. I do a little update what's happening in supply chain worldwide and in Canada. And of course, this week, we've seen a 4-day strike by the Port of Montreal, which now has been extended to an additional 36 hours. You can imagine what that has caused here for us in Canada. Massive delays, not only on the steamship lines, but the rail system as well, because a lot of containers come through the Port of Montreal. So we're watching this daily, and hopefully this strike will end soon and we can go back to normal operations. Also, Embraer has obtained a $6 million US dollar loan from Brazil State Bank, BNDES, and private banks on a 50-50 basis. So, of course, Embraer recently terminated a potential agreement with aerospace and defense company Boeing in April. Boeing also reported a $2.4 billion net loss in revenue for the second quarter of 2020 due to the pandemic. Of course, the cancellation of 50% compared to last year. So Boeing popular 737 MAX was grounded after 2 deadly crashes within a few months. And sorry, I said 600 million. That's what I said. Don't know what I said before, but thanks, Peter. So Boeing's popular 737 MAX was grounded after 2 deadly crashes within 5 months. Air travel is not expected to recover for another 2 to 3 years, as I have mentioned in other webinars. With the decline of airline passengers and booming demand for air cargo, as you can imagine, we're suffering with the non-operation of the Air Canada flight to Brazil on a daily basis, although Air Canada is flying to Brazil now once a week every Thursday, and taking taking cargo on those planes, and only cargo, so to try to minimize the the loss that we had in transporting cargo back and forth to Brazil. So as you can imagine, that flight is pretty full on a weekly basis, and we hope that Air Canada can increase another flight per week to São Paulo to help everyone. So with the decline of airline and booming on air cargo capacity, Embraer has reconfigured many commercial aircraft to take cargo where the seats were on the aircraft. So not only on the belly that we call it, of the plane, but also in the cabin. And ANAC, Brazil Civil Aviation Regulatory Authority. There you go. I wasn't moving my slides on the one that I wanted. So ANAC, Civil Aviation, has approved more freight on empty passenger aircraft, as I said, in addition to placing small packages in overhead bin and stowage compartments. So airlines are using any space that they can to move cargo, not only on the belly. And finally, outbound China air freight rates are expected to shoot up again by September, when Apple and Samsung ramp up shipping, and competition for all cargo planes will be intense. We saw in the beginning of the pandemic in March, rates going from $6 US a kilo from China going everywhere in the world it went up to $25 US a kilo. We saw a decrease in the last month to maybe $10 to $15 a kilo. And now, of course, as the end of the year approaches, we expect those rates to increase again. So not an easy time for air freight at the moment. Supply chain logistics concerns with aerospace and defense. It's just some comments that we have. Raw material and sourcing. Aerospace procurement managers must consider variables such as costs, materials, specifications, delivery timelines, transportation modes, and recent changes in international trade agreements. For example, a post-Brexit, UK could renegotiate trade agreements with countries both within and outside the European Union, creating uncertainty for aerospace and defense players who do business there. Supply disruption risks. Aerospace procurement directors should also forge a positive long-term relationship with their suppliers, which starts with understanding the supplier's business and ends with working together to renew market trends and cost drivers to reduce inflation-related risks. And large material handling and storage, the not so simple tasks to safely lifting, inspecting, and sorting large and heavier parts can require a great deal of space and even specialized equipment. The aerospace industry also tends to need these parts in a short notice, meaning the storage, organization, and accessibility are key. We do a lot of aircraft on the ground parts where we have to ship small parts of airplanes all over the world, and this has been a constant in Brazil as well. So if you need any help in this matter, please contact us. So now I would like to invite Alex to show his presentation and give us the insight on aerospace and prospective opportunities in Brazil. So welcome, Alex, once again, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Arnon. Let me just put my camera up so people can see me too. Just a second, please. Okay, here I am. So thank you very much. I'd like to begin by thanking Consul General for your kind opening remarks. And also thank you, Melohawk, Arnon, Peter, for the opportunity to share our insights with this distinguished group of Canadian companies that have joined us today. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, and I've seen some contacts and some people that we've met before join us and wave hello. So hello to all that I've had the pleasure to meet over these 10 years doing aerospace business in Brazil, and proudly serving Canadian companies here. So thank you all very much for joining us today. As our time is short and we have a lot of ground to cover, let's quickly begin by taking a quick look at our agenda today. So we're going to cover aerospace perspectives and opportunities in Brazil. And we'll begin by quickly introducing you to the Trade Commissioner Service in case you haven't had the chance to work with us before. We'll also share a word about CanExport program, which is an interesting tool to assist you explore new opportunities in the global aerospace business. Of course, the focus today is on aerospace, so we'll proceed with a quick snapshot of the Brazilian aviation market. We'll dive deeper into the Brazilian aerospace value chain, trends, opportunities, along with its domestic maintenance, repair, and overhaul market. We'll also take a quick look at the explosively growing RPA, also known as drones, business in Brazil, followed by its highly skilled space industry. So at the end, of course, we'll be delighted to answer your questions. So let's begin with a quick introduction of the Trade Commissioner Service, of which I am a very proud team member. We're a 125-year-old organization dedicated to assist you expand your business internationally, all around the world. We help you save time and money. We reduce your export risks. We help you expand to global markets. We resolve business problems for you. We connect you to the best contacts locally. We help you gain business insights, and we provide you business insights. We find new contacts for you. And the thing I like to do the most as a long-term trade commissioner is to find new opportunities for you, which we can together translate into real business. So one of the tools in our toolbox to assist you expand internationally is called CanExport. So if you haven't heard about it yet, CanExport has helped more than 300 small and medium enterprises explore new opportunities in 53 markets around the world, with contributions totaling more than $10 million already. CanExport reimburses up to 50% of eligible expenses, requires that the applicant match funds on a one-to-one basis, is open with few exceptions to companies looking at export markets worldwide, provides a minimum contribution of $10,000 and a maximum contribution of $1 short to $100,000, is open with few exceptions to all industry sectors. So please, by all means, check the website that's on the top right of your screen there, www.international.gc.ca/CanExport for more information on how CanExport can assist you. So on to our core of the presentation here. Let's take a quick look at the Brazilian aviation market. To understand its size and importance, we must understand first the country's continental dimensions. So as you can see on the map there on the left, Brazil is the 5th largest country in the world with 8.5 million square kilometers, home to the 6th largest population in the world. North, south, east, west distances, as you can see there too, are about 4,300 kilometers each. Very, very long. Just so you can picture how far that is, of course, speaking from Canada, that's not alien to you, but just so you can have an idea, I'm speaking to you right from the Tropic of Capricorn right now. São Paulo is right at the Tropic of Capricorn. And to get to the northernmost city of Brazil, I'd have to travel on a straight line for 3,500 kilometers from here. If I were to drive there, it would be something like 5,000 kilometers. And because the roads are not necessarily paved all the way, it would take me about 84 hours to get there by car. So definitely, that immediately tells you the aviation is an absolute necessity to connect the country. And regional aviation is the highlight of that connection necessity. Another way to look at the potential is by comparing the passenger demand in Brazil with other large countries like Canada and the USA. So as you can see in the numbers there, Brazil has transported about 110 million passengers last year. That's only about half the Brazilian population. But if you compare it with other large countries like the US, for example, the US transports 3 times its population by air every year, and Canada twice its population by air every year. So the gap there is indicative of the huge repressed demand for flights in the country. And that's where some of the opportunities in the next few years are going to come from. Of course, Brazilians would very much like to fly instead of drive. I bet no one in Brazil would like to sit on a car for 84 hours to get from the northernmost part of the country São Paulo, which is the economic powerhouse of the country. But its untapped potential is mostly due to, in most cases, lack of necessary logistics and necessary infrastructure. So in some places there are no airports, or there are only land strips where only smaller aircraft can land. So that may help explain also why the civil aviation fleet in Brazil is so big. There are lots of private aircraft, lots of experimental aircraft, and lots of private jets and private piston aircraft that fly in the country to connect those remote areas where regional aviation can't reach. So the civil aviation fleet in Brazil is the second largest in the world. 22,000 aircraft are registered in Brazil. And just as a fun fact, the largest fleet of helicopters in the world in one city is based in São Paulo. São Paulo has almost twice as many helicopters as New York City, for example, which is the second largest. But you may wonder, what about the impacts of the COVID crisis on the Brazilian aviation? Arnon was mentioning some of the news which are sort of dark for aviation, and how did that affect Brazil? That's a question that everybody asks, of course. If you look at the chart below, which contains information I obtained from the Brazilian Association of Airlines, it shows, of course, that the demand for air travel in Brazil has dropped significantly. The COVID crisis hit the Brazilian commercial aviation head on, just as it did everywhere else. So the worst of the crisis was, of course, in April in Brazil, where demand for passenger transportation dropped to only 9% of the revenue passenger kilometer number of the previous year, the same month. So that was as low as it got during the pandemic crisis, but it has slowly but surely started to recover. The fact that it never completely halted is something interesting to notice. Even though it dropped to its lowest level, there was a minimum network of flights in Brazil that continued to operate because of the immense territorial extension of the country. So it couldn't just shut down. So 9% continued to fly in April. It recovered. It's slowly recovering. So in June, it's already up to 15%. It's mostly domestic flights. International flights are almost all interrupted except for cargo, as Arnaud mentioned. But the interesting thing here is that the Brazilian Association of Airlines estimates that by the end of the year, in December, traffic should return to something like 65% of the RPK of 2019. It might sound optimistic, but there's credibility in it, especially if you consider that December in Brazil, opposite to, of course, North America, is summer. So December is typically the high season for travel, with travelers going on vacation to places and also traveling because of holidays, visiting family and all. So it's not totally impossible that the 65% estimate really materialized, mostly from domestic flights and mostly from regional flights in terms of airlines. So the perspective is positive for Brazil, and the outlook is positive. Actually, some would even venture to say that the whole Latin American region is going to be one of the first to recover as soon as the pandemic is controlled, of course. And Brazil specifically, because of its major need for domestic aviation, will be leading that recovery. And that recovery is going to be led by regional aviation with narrow body aircraft, with smaller jets. So there's no crystal ball here. Everything depends on the evolution of the COVID, of course. So we're not in a position to guess when things will really resume, but those are the expectations of the industry at the moment. But talking about the industry, how does that relate to the Brazilian aerospace value chain? So we were talking about difficulties in the value chain, which Arnon enlightened us with. But how does it work for the Brazilian aerospace value chain? Well, in Brazil, we actually have one of the largest aircraft OEMs in the world. Embraer. Actually, we have two major OEMs operating in Brazil. We have Embraer, as I mentioned, and we also have Helibras, which is Airbus Helicopters' subsidiary in Brazil. The two OEMs, combined with a few experimental aircraft manufacturers, and the MRO demand for parts and services, add up to a $9.2 billion market of component and services imported into Brazil every year. About $500 million of that comes from Canadian exporters. So we've been shipping to Brazil approximately $500 million every year, worth of mostly landing gears and engines, which is our forte in terms of exports, but also a variety number of other parts and components like composite materials, avionics, critical software, pilot training, cables, shims, precision parts, raw materials, UV water systems, primary structures, even manufacturing equipment like laser projection systems, assembly tooling, molds, ground support equipment. So it's a very long list of items that we export from Canada. And these are items that we export frequently. There are other spot items that we do ship from Canada to Brazil. But we wish we could do more. We think that's not all that we can do. And we're pretty sure we can help more Canadian companies become a part of this value chain. So let's talk about opportunities then. Considering the COVID-induced downturn in the aviation market, where would the value chain opportunities be? Is the future dark and gloomy, or are there opportunities? Well, future is not going to be easy for sure with the downturn, and especially for wide-body jets. But for regional jets, things are a little better and may recover faster. So the opportunities would be in not necessarily the traditional value chains areas, but let's say, for example, on the manufacturing side itself, any cost reduction technologies such as Industry 4.0 related AI are welcome, of course. Another element to consider is the opportunity to increase the value added and diversify by surfing the consolidation wave that had already begun prior to COVID. So M&A, mergers and acquisitions are expected to accelerate and could be an interesting strategic opportunity for you. Please talk to us, the trade commissioners, to assist you identify the best M&A opportunities in markets of your interest around the world. And here in Brazil, of course, I'm more than glad to discuss with you on a one-on-one basis on how we can support you identify the best way you can add more value to your products and services. But opportunities are not related or connected only with traditional value chain items. They are in fact coming from emerging technologies. And actually these emerging technologies should play an increasing role in the future developments of OEMs globally, and Brazil is not an exception. So CO2 emission reductions, for example, are top of the list there. Carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation, an initiative of the International Civil Aviation Organization, the ICAO, will certainly boost technologies that can mitigate carbon emissions and or promote the use of alternative fuels. As you know, industry is discussing the utilization of electric or hybrid propulsion aircraft, and several projects are being considered, including in Brazil. For example, Embraer has announced a couple of years ago a partnership with Uber to develop an electric vertical takeoff and landing, as we call it, eVTOL vehicle for improved urban mobility. And you can see a picture of what the vehicle would be like there. I really hope we can fly on it soon. Other trends are clearly pointing to short-term opportunities, like, for example, onboard sanitation technologies, like you can see in the picture there, Air Canada's example of what they're doing. In the wake of the COVID crisis, for obvious reasons, everybody's looking for technologies that can help passengers regain confidence to get on a plane again. Although the cabin is a very safe place already because of the filtering systems that are in place there, some of it already being used in hospitals to passengers would like to see more. And that's not only for airlines, but also for private jets. Of course, the owners of private jets would like to see technologies that can make them feel safer in the aircraft. So all of that is going to be in demand, and these are all opportunities to be explored. And there are even further opportunities in non-traditional areas, like, for example, in services. There'd be aerial forest firefighting opportunities. As you know, large forests, every year there are big fires, so aircraft services that can help fight forest firefighting would be in demand. Training and simulation is another area where demand is going to grow, and it will continue to grow. Actually, it's always been strong in Brazil. There's already very heavy Canadian investment in the country with 2 large training centers with simulators in Brazil, and that's going to continue. Defense and security is another area where there are lots of opportunities in Brazil, where we're going to see some in space, but also Embraer is a manufacturer of aircraft of military nature. So you can see the picture there of the new KC-390, the aircraft Embraer just delivered to the Brazilian Air Force, the cargo airlift. Embraer also produces light trainers with our engines, from Pratt & Whitney, Canada. The aircraft called Tucano, as it's pronounced in Portuguese, and the Super Tucano. They're both equipped with Pratt & Whitney engines, and they're used for training purposes. So that's another area of great opportunity. And then there will be niche opportunities. So you see there a picture of an airship that was developed, and this prototype is already flying in Brazil. Actually, there's a partnership with a Canadian company for that. And the goal here is to explore old/new opportunities, old/new technologies to transport cargo. The project there is to transport about 15 tons of cargo on this airship, which is, of course, very fuel efficient and very maneuverable and easy to land and take off. So it could be a solution for companies like MELLOHAWK. So I'm pretty sure that MELLOHAWK would prefer to fly cargo from the north of Brazil to the rich south part, not by road, but by airships with a lower freight cost than by a jet, for example, depending on the type of cargo, of course. So that's one niche opportunity that can be explored for Brazilian aerospace. Another area of great potential for aerospace business in Brazil is the MRO, as most of you know, maintenance, repair, and overhaul of aircraft. So with the fleet size I mentioned earlier, Brazil naturally builds the gravity to become an MRO hub for the whole region. Business in the Latin America region for 2025, according to Airbus, would reach something like $6.3 billion US. But of course, that was a pre-COVID assessment. Nobody really knows where it's going to land, but the expectations are that the number presented by Airbus will be reached, but maybe 2 or 3 years later, depending on how fast industry recovers from COVID. So that's a huge market to explore, big opportunity. And this opportunity, of course, not by chance, has created a huge number of maintenance bases in Brazil. So there are 522 maintenance bases operating in Brazil, including large airline MRO centers like Azul Airlines MRO, as you can see in the picture there on the left, Go Airlines MRO, capable of repairing tires and engines and structural repair, even seats. So they can do almost everything at their repair center. But not just for airlines, there are huge MRO centers for business jets too. So on the right there, you see the MRO center of TAM, not the airline, TAM Business Aviation, which is the largest again in Latin America. So it's quite close to where I am here at the Tropic of Capricorn. But Canadians have also spotted the value of the MRO market in Brazil. Pratt & Whitney Canada has just opened a brand new engine overhaul center here in Brazil, adding to the repair facilities they already had, and they're appointing delegated repair centers across the country. So they're expanding locally. And GE has a huge engine maintenance and test facility out in the mountains of Rio. It's one of the largest in the world, actually, and some people who are older in this industry know it by the name of Selma. So all of that indicates that there are major opportunities in the Brazilian aerospace value chain, and that includes MRO, maintenance, repair, and overhaul. But just as for the rest of the value chain, I wouldn't like to linger much on the classic opportunities in the value chain. But following the global trend, we need to look at the next technology. So predictive maintenance tools based on big data analytics are growing in potential globally. And in Brazil, it's not an exception. Of course, with the aircrafts producing gigabytes of data out of the million sensors installed in every part, big data analytics is definitely a necessity for the MRO industry for predictive maintenance to lower costs. By the way, any tools that increase reliability, expedite service, and reduce the aircraft on ground timing is very welcome. Like, for example, augmented reality for the technicians, or RPA inspection instead of visual inspection. Digital twins, like the picture you see on the background. That's a digital twin promo of GE's digital twin engine. So all these opportunities are moving ahead fast, and they're opening up new cross-sector windows of opportunity. So we're talking now aerospace, but we're talking IT, we're talking science of data. So all of that converges into new opportunities for us from Canada. And of course, we must say that with increased digital content on board and increased utilization of virtual tools for the MRO industry, cybersecurity is definitely a necessity. Security of the airplane from a digital perspective is becoming a major concern. And just as for the traditional maintenance, repair, and overhaul industry, the repair of the aircraft is one point where security has to be strict, so no issues are presented later. So all these new technologies are actual opportunities for Canadian companies into the Brazilian and global MRO market coming the recovery of the COVID crisis. But remember, it's not just about wide-body jets. We're talking about regional jets that are recovering first. We're talking about the general aviation fleet, which is big in Brazil. So think MRO, don't think only airlines. That's a tip for you. So continue our quick brush up of all important aerospace subsectors in Brazil. And again, our time is very short. We could get deeper into each of these subsectors, but just a quick brush up so you have an idea of where we are, and then we can explore more details later during the questions. One of the most important subsectors now is the RPA sector, or the remotely piloted aircraft, also known as drones. We in the industry don't call them drones very often because drones can be anything that's controlled remotely, including ships, boats, cars. But RPA is the term that's mostly accepted in industry these days, so remotely piloted aircraft. And this industry in Brazil is actually very important and growing fast. So the fleet of lower than 250 grams RPAs in Brazil has more than doubled in the last couple of years. So it was 30,000 aircraft registered in 2017. It's now up to 72,000 aircraft in 2019. And that adds up to a business worth of approximately $100 million every year. The Brazilian Association of Drones has estimated this is going to grow by 30% a year in the next 5 years. I believe that's very conservative. I think given the flexibility and the number of new applications that can be developed with these aircraft, this is a very, very conservative estimate. I believe that this is going to grow even faster. Like I mentioned, the applications for drones are mostly limited by creativity, actually, but the regulatory framework too. So you need to make sure that whatever you create with the drones is safe and you don't hit other people or buildings or aircrafts with the drones. So limited by creativity, but also the regulatory framework. There's no shortage of creative solutions being developed and tested in Brazil with drones. The regulatory framework in Brazil is very modern and serious and well aligned with Transport Canada, FAA, EASA. The Brazilian Air Force is actually responsible for air traffic control, and they're also responsible for RPA, air traffic control. They do a very serious job in Brazil, very thorough and very professional. So it's safe to fly RPAs in Brazil. Restrictions apply to what people in the industry know as BV laws, or beyond visual line of sight. But it is allowed under certain circumstances in Brazil, which enables more flexibility in terms of applications for drones. Talking about applications, let's take a quick look at the applications that are currently mostly demanded in Brazil at the moment for RPA. So mapping and topography, agriculture and forestry, environment, construction, infrastructure, mining, oil and gas are the top 6 applications. And you'll notice that the percentages there won't add up because, of course, most of these applications overlap. So, of course, you use mapping and topography for agriculture and forestry too. So that's why the percentages there don't add up before you ask why. But these top 6 are in very high demand, and there is already Canadian suppliers of aircraft services and solutions taking advantage of this explosive growth. So other innovative uses of aircrafts are also being explored, some of them related to transportation of small cargo. But like I said before, it's going to be some time before you can transport cargo in urban environments. Of course, you want to get your pizza by drone. You want it to be hot and warm, or more hot when you receive it, but you don't want it to crash with your house, or you don't want it to drop on your head. So there's still something to be developed in terms of safety for drones for that particular type of usage. And also in terms of UAV traffic management, as we call it, to make it safe. So we're still a few years away from it, but hopefully you'll get your pizza by drone in the near future. And finally, let's take a quick look at the final frontier, space. And as you know, as you noticed, I'm a big fan of Star Trek. So that's why the little introduction there. So given the territorial extension I presented to you earlier, and the extension of the borders of Brazil, as it was shown on the first slide, we have a western border in Brazil that's 17,000 kilometers long. That's about twice the distance between Paris and Beijing. To properly patrol areas like that, to properly do the surveillance of areas like that, you must use some form of Earth observation technology. You can't just do that even by plane or drone or on foot. All those technologies complement each other, but you obviously need some form of satellite coverage for areas like that. So that's an absolute necessity in Brazil. I'm sorry. And in fact, all main applications of space technology are in very high demand in the country. So Earth observation, as I mentioned, GNSS, space exploration, telecommunications, meteorology, all these areas are already in high demand in Brazil, and more is definitely needed. So there are several projects, and the applications I mentioned here are abundant sources of opportunities for the whole space value chain. So given the research intensive nature of these projects, most successful Canadian companies in space business in Brazil have explored strategic partnerships in SDI, R&D, manufacturing, If you're interested, of course, and if you're in this business, I'd be delighted to assist you identifying the right partners in Brazil for you. Like I said, partnership is a very important aspect of doing business in space value chain in Brazil. And then connecting with the small but very experienced and very capable domestic space industry is a must. I have a picture there at the bottom of myself and Consul General Dr. Cameron at the Brazilian National Institute of Space Research. This is the Laboratory of Integration and Test Satellites. They just integrated and tested a geostationary satellite out of that facility, a 5-ton satellite that was launched a couple of years ago. So they're very capable. They have a lot of experience and expertise, and companies associated with the business are also very well prepared too. So again, a very interesting opportunity for partnerships there. These partnerships, of course, will give you the chance to participate in the upcoming bids for optical, radar, telecommunication satellites that are certainly going to come in the next 10 years. Some like the optical satellite is already on. So this is happening, and I bet it's not going to take too long. So please, if you're interested, talk to me, and I'll be more than glad to assist you. Another area to consider are opportunities related to the Brazilian spaceport in Alcântara, in the north of Brazil, again, almost 4,000 kilometers away from here. But because of that, it's near the equator. So Alcântara is located approximately 2 degrees south of the equator, which makes it perfect for equatorial launches, which saves fuel and mitigate risks of the launch process. There is actually an a call for interest by the Brazilian Space Agency for companies interested in launching from Alcântara. And several startups in the space payload business have manifested interest, including a few from Canada. So I'll conclude here, and I'll just mention to Arnon that it seems that a new era of space logistics is dawning, Arnon. And I'll finish with a suggestion for MELLOHAWK to create a space logistics division. It seems that the cargo to space is going to be a business pretty soon. Maybe you're going to be launching from Alcântara. So that's how I'll conclude the presentation, with this out of space view of how MELLOHAWK is going to be in the future. And let's begin the countdown for questions, Arnon. So thank you very much. Thank you all for listening. I know it was fast. There's a lot that's being covered, but I'll take time for questions. So thank you all. Thank you very much.
Alex, thank you so much. I love the content I told you before, and I'm all for the space of MELLOHAWK launching cargo and getting there much faster than what's happening right now with COVID, right? So hopefully it would change. Amazing content. So I have a few questions for you. I'm sure other people will have it too. And the first one will be, do you, when a potential client calls from Canada, and I'm sure you've got this before, and you can do commercial intelligence, you have a database of potential buyers or partners, because we always talk about partnership. We tell Canadian companies to form partnerships in Brazil. And I know the Trade Commissioner Services has a list of really detailed and solid potential buyers and people interested in technology. So can you talk about that when you get a call from Canada? What's your process to help someone?
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. That's a very interesting question. Actually, for aerospace, we're even a little more specific. We're a little more customized. So we usually don't work with a list, because aerospace is not let's say, a sector that congregates a lot of companies. Most companies know each other. It's like in Brazil, for example, there are something close to 200 companies operating in the aerospace business. In Canada, it's about 700 companies. So over time, we get to know each other and know who's who, and that's the key here. As a trade commissioner, what I usually do is a customized market potential analysis for the companies that are interested in the market. So I'll get my knowledge and experience at your service, and I'll connect you with the right partners. So instead of just providing you with a list of potentials, and then analyze your business, see what you can do, what value you add, and then commonly we'll decide on a strategy moving forward, which could be approaching the OEMs in Brazil, or maybe not. Maybe that doesn't make sense for some of the companies. Maybe the OEM is too demanding, and it would take too much capital for you to become a tier 1 supplier of the OEM. So the intelligence here would be to analyze whether it wouldn't be a better fit for you to connect with a tier 1 supplier of the OEM that's existing in Brazil or somewhere else, or even a tier 2. Perhaps you could form a joint venture with a tier 2 in Brazil, and together you could add value enough that you will not only supply to the local tier 1, but you'll also export internationally to other OEMs, like in France or in Seattle. That's how we usually approach aerospace. It has to be a little more client-based. It has to be customized, and I'm more than glad to do that. That's a very interesting part of our job, understanding your business and understanding how we can support you locally. So please do call, do send an email, and I'll connect with you one-on-one so we can collectively explore the best ways forward.
Great, that's what I thought. Alex, another question. What are other countries that are very competitive as well in this market that you know of? So I'm sure there is other countries that also have lots of technology that are competing against Canada. So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, aerospace is usually clustered around the OEMs, right? So of course, Canada has a very rich aerospace industry because there are several OEMs operating in the country, including Bombardier, but not only. We're very proud of all of them, but we have Bombardier, we have Viking Air, we have Bell Helicopters, which manufactures helicopters out of Mirabel, and we have a very, very thorough value chain around them. So from engines to rivets, we do everything in Canada. So that's part of the answer. If you look at where the major OEMs are, you will find a very competitive cluster or clusters around them. So of course, Canada, the USA, France are very competitive in this area, but other countries are emerging. So China is trying to develop their aerospace program, and they've been trying for some time. Japan also, although it's being put on hold, not only because of COVID, but because the market is really busy at the moment. So in terms of numbers of competitors, especially for jets. So there's Japan, there's China, as I mentioned. Russia has their program too. So there are several countries that have or are working to have a local OEM, which will drive a competitive value chain around them. Of course, other countries also supply and are part of the value chain, but the bulk of it will be around the OEMs.
Perfect. Yeah, we have shipped through the years AOG parts, aircraft on the ground parts, all over the world. Brazil seems to be a place where we ship quite a bit. Now it's a little bit delicate, of course. We don't have the direct flight there. We have to transit wherever there is a flight. As I explained, changes are happening every 48 hours, unfortunately, with passenger flights going to Brazil. So it's been a struggle, but you just manage somehow. So I know Canada exports a lot of technology to Brazil. That's why I ask you. And I think the Canadian dollar as well, it's competitive in comparison to the US dollar right now. So people would buy from Canada. And another question that I have for you, and I know there is a lot of trade shows that used to happen in Brazil and all over the world. And of course, now all of those are canceled. How are people dealing with the fact that you don't have a trade show to go to and meet your potential buyers or interested clients? Have you?
That's an interesting question. Yep.
Have you had a lot of interest to do introductions via Zoom or web introductions and meetings to present potential buyers or sellers in this case? Absolutely.
Actually, that's a trend, and it has become more prevailing after the COVID crisis, but it had already begun before it. before you get on a plane and travel to Brazil, just to share your PowerPoint presentation with a potential partner, it makes every sense that you do it virtually beforehand. So we had been doing that even before the crisis to save time and money for Canadian companies. But we still believe that the in-person face-to-face meeting is important, especially culturally important in Latin America. People expect you to be close to them, so that's not going to go away. Well, I don't think that the presential meeting is going to ever go away. It's just that the early stages of negotiation will most certainly shift to 100% digital, and then the more, let's say, delicate part of the transactions are going to be done in person. You don't want to cut a multi-billion-dollar transaction worth of, say, engines or landing gears by Zoom. So you're going to need to meet the eventually, and then or if it's investment, for example, of course, you don't want to invest in a location without ever setting foot there. You want to go there and see. So I think, and I'm a very big fan of technology, as you can see. I love this kind of format that we're using now. I think it's more accessible to a greater number of people. You can reach more people, and trade commissioners are definitely ready to assist you in the virtual world too. But for aerospace, you have to be prepared to commit a little bit of time and money to travel as soon as it's possible, of course, and safe. But you're going to need to be around to actually be successful and be on the radar of companies. Now, in terms of trade shows, they're all adapting too. So we just had the Farnborough International Air Show for the first time. It wasn't a presential show, so it was a virtual show. The presenters were presenting virtually. There were lots of B2B meetings virtually. So it was a different experience, not the same thing as I mentioned, but it worked well. So yeah, digital is the future, but not, I think, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. Eventually, we'll go back to the physical contact. And I also want to stress again how much resources you have and the Trade Commissioner Services in Brazil has to all Canadian exporters that want to penetrate in that market, so they can start with you. And then with us as well, we, as I said, we do a lot of consulting together with your offices to make sure we give the correct information in terms of logistics, in terms of taxes in Brazil when the product is imported. Taxation in Brazil for customs is very complex, and Canadian companies get scared, but everyone in Brazil goes through the same process. So it's important to do an analysis and work together. And of course, you are a part of the Canadian government. It's a free service that people can take advantage of. So I encourage everyone to contact you and exchange information. As we already have a few Canadian companies exporting drone technology to Brazil, we are part of that, and it's exciting. And I see on your slide how much it has grown, right, from 2019 to now, and eventually it's a multi-million-dollar market that it's going to grow by the day. And so I encourage everyone to take advantage of your knowledge. And I don't,
here for you.
Yeah, I don't see, let's see here. How serious, one last question and then we'll end this. How serious is the Space Force announcements the US is making? Is Brazil taking this seriously? That's a question from in our chat. Peter, yeah, Space Force. I don't know if Alex can answer that, but
no, I'd rather not. Well, I'm a big fan of the. Let's just make a joke here. I'm a big fan of the show with Steve Carell, the Space Force show that's on Netflix. So I'll stop there. Okay, so
that's good.
I want to make comments about the U.S. decision.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's a good note to end. Alex, I can't thank you enough for taking part in this webinar with us. Thank you so much for bringing so much knowledge to our Canadian clients. We hope to see you again on another webinar, I'm sure. And I'm sure you're going to be bombarded with questions from our our fellow Canadian companies looking into doing business in Brazil. So I want to thank you and Dr. Heather Cameron, our Consul General for the Canadian Consulate Office in São Paulo, for joining me. Alex Kraut, thank you so much again, and I'll see you everyone on our next webinar in 2 weeks. And
thank you all.
Have a nice afternoon. Have a nice weekend, everyone. And it's a long weekend for us here, so we're going to enjoy.
Enjoy it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.